Morning, everybody. We've just had a very dramatic big marker countdown because that's the software platform we're using this morning for our presentation, Foot Anstey sponsored presentation on post-COVID Southwest economic recovery and opportunities for clean growth. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. We'll be starting in a minute or two. While we're waiting just for a few last minute joiners, it's maybe just worth covering a couple of housekeeping points just to let everyone know that your cameras and microphones are turned off remotely at our end, so don't worry about sound being inadvertently picked up if you're having a bit of chaos at home. Q&A is turned on, however, and please, we invite questions to be posed whilst we're running the presentations from the speakers, because we should have a bit of time at the end, maybe 10 to 15 minutes, to run through some questions and answers with the panel. Also, just to mention that we are hoping to have a follow-up communication after the presentations, really highlighting some of the key points and circulating some of the slides. So there will be opportunity for you maybe to pick up some of the info on the slides, and you don't have to therefore spend your time listening to the presentations and taking careful notes. You should hopefully get a summary of what's talked about. So just like to say thank you for everyone for joining us, and in particular our three guest speakers. First off, we have David Ralph talking. David is, I think, well known to probably most people who are here this morning. He's got over 30 years leading some interesting public, private and community-led organisations. He's the CEO of the Heart of the Southwest LEP, which is obviously responsible for delivering economic opportunities in our region. Our second speaker is Andrew Wood. Andrew heads up Growth, Development and Prosperity Services at East Devon District Council. He's also the Project Director Lead for the Exeter and East Devon Enterprise Zone. And he's going to be talking to us and updating us on the strategies around what East Devon's up to and the Enterprise Zone this morning. Our third speaker is Edward Sargent. Edward's from EDF Pivot Power. He's an engineer by background, and he's one of these people who has a genuine understanding about energy and infrastructure and supply, which is all very important as we move over to greater electrification of our economy, and all really about joining that into meeting business needs, which is obviously very important as we're looking forwards towards moving towards net zero carbon and clean growth. Last off, I should mention I'm joined as a joint host this morning by Edward Venmore from Foot Anstey. Edward is looking after our extra office profile and promoting Foot Anstey really in terms of our contacts with the Exeter region and wider surrounds. So without further ado, we're at 12:05. I'll hand over to David. Thank you.
Yeah, hi, morning everybody. So a little bit about LEPs, a bit about recovery, and then I thought I'd just sort of introduce clean growth, because it's increasingly important and really is fundamental to where we think we want to take our economy and our place post-COVID. And we are talking about recovery now. I mean, I'm not sure we're out of the woods yet, but certainly just in the last few days, we are back talking about recovery plans rather than a lot of work over the last 12 months in terms of just responding and trying to help people and places and businesses survive. So just a little bit about LEPs first of all. So the LEP that I work for covers Somerset, Devon, including Plymouth and Tor Bay. It's a large LEP. It's about a third of the economy of what we sort of all know as the Southwest. But we'd work pretty closely into Cornwall and Dorset, and also up into the Bristol Conurbation, West of England partnership up there. And there are 38 LEPs in England who all come together and set up about 10 years ago, and really is it sort of architecture of government about trying to translate some of the government policy into local delivery. We've had a capital program of about £750 million to invest in the area, which is actually coming to an end. And to a degree, we are waiting a little bit around how government wants to work with local places in a post-COVID environment. But I'll talk about that a little bit more as we go forward. So just to talk a little bit about recovery, first of all. So we're sort of nearly a year into this, and we published last summer our route map to recovery, which if anybody wants to have a look at it, I mean, it's a series of diagrams really, is on our website. And it was reasonably important because we were trying to make sure that people were sort of facing in the same direction when we were thinking about recovery. So one of the first things we said is that we all need to work to reasonably common data sets. Otherwise, we don't want to get into a row about who is suffering the worst and who is doing well out of it, etc., etc. And most places have had some real challenges. One or two sectors, one or two places have done okay out of it. So we agreed sort of common data sets, and actually we did a data set across the whole of the Southwest England, which was really helpful because we could compare. And we got Oxford Economics to help us with that. So that was really helpful to understand what was going on. We did some forecasting. To be honest, we've slightly given up on forecasting at the moment because it's so subject to local lockdowns, etc., etc. But hopefully, if we're now on a trajectory towards opening up, then we'll do some recovering. But the headlines are 14% reduction in GDP, probably not getting back to the level of economic GDP value that we had before we went into lockdown until probably early 2023 now. Now, some sectors will go faster. The recovery looks, I think it looks like a W. It's a sort of a W on its side a bit, but it's certainly not a V shape anymore. And you could see about a 10% reduction through first lockdown, a little bit of a squiggle in second lockdown, and then about a 4% reduction in the third lockdown, and then you also had a little bit, possibly a couple of percent into Brexit as well. So somewhere around 14-15% total. But yeah, some sectors have done okay through that. So that's some of the data. The second was about sort of local recovery plans, really. So most areas have got a local recovery plan. That's pretty important. Most of the response stuff has been national, so things like CBILS, furloughing, loan grants to business have been administered by local authorities, and they've done a really good job in this part of the world to try and make sure that funding gets out to businesses, emergency funding, etc. And we as a LEP have done, it's called Build Back Better plan, and that features very much around clean growth, which I'll come on to a bit later. So it is important to sort of recognise, and we're expecting to see on March the 3rd, which is the budget, the Chancellor sort of set out his view of a recovery plan. It's called the Plan for Growth, and we're expecting to see that on March the 3rd. Now, how much detail we'll go into, I don't know. There obviously is a little bit of uncertainty still about whether we will get through the next 2 or 3 months towards opening, but we expect to see a plan, and then we expect to see a CSR in the autumn, which will start to sort of really put some funding into various initiatives. The third thing about recovery is it's important to recognise, and this is pretty obvious really, that not all places are the same. That applies to clean growth a bit, which I'll come on to. So some areas have been hit harder than others, and some sectors have been hit harder than others. So in our route map to recovery, we've identified 8 sectors that have been hit particularly hard. So obviously retail, tourism, but also creative industries. So, our sort of theatres and our cultural attractions have been pretty much shut for nearly a year now, but also manufacturing, although that's looking a bit better at the moment. And I'm trying to think of the other sectors. Construction hasn't been too bad, a bit wobbly in first lockdown, been a bit better since. But there's some sectors. And in terms of places, there is without question rural areas and coastal areas where there is that dependency on tourism and hospitality, etc., have been hit hardest, and that's a national figure as well, national status as well as local. The fourth thing was we wanted areas, in order to respond effectively, you need to do different things at different times, and most of the last 12 months has been about response, just trying to help businesses survive, just trying to recognise challenges to individuals who might have lost their job, be on furlough, etc., etc. Last summer, when it looked like after first lockdown, we certainly got into a discussion about recovery. But then we got into lockdown again, and since then it's been back into response mode again. And I would say now we're starting to think about recovery again. So there is a trajectory now towards seeing things return to what some people call the new normal, and trying to understand what that looks like. Which brings me on to my final thing, which is most of what we've seen in terms of the impacts of the virus economically. So we've been very fortunate in this part of the world not to suffer disproportionately around the incidence of the disease, although plenty of people have ended up in hospital or died, unfortunately, as a result of the disease. But we have suffered disproportionately hard in terms of economic impact. And that's partly because of some of the long-standing structural issues of our economy. So many of our businesses operate on very small margins. Many of our what we call our bedrock sectors are quite low wage and low skilled, so agriculture, tourism, etc. So they've struggled a bit. Some of them are lifestyle businesses, so don't make huge amounts of money. But many of these things preempted COVID. So the impact on the high street, that was already starting to change significantly. And yes, it's accelerated a lot, but that was already starting to happen. And then similarly, using stuff like we're using today, future of work, how we operate, we were starting to see that, and it's been accelerated. So I'm not saying all the things were preempted COVID, but largely, a little bit paraphrasing, recovery has the impact of the virus has largely been about accelerating some of the things that were starting to occur. But what that is a very big opportunity for the Southwest, because one of the difficulties of the Southwest has been its proximity to places, and actually that is increasingly attractive as a place to live and a place to work. It may be less need for people to go into offices every day, and so we're already seeing quite a big impact on people looking around. Difficult to understand the future office space, etc. But that is an opportunity around what we call the future of work and how we might take that forward. So that brings me on to sort of clean growth and just trying to set a bit of a scene for that. And I think it is important to understand that we have fundamentally changed the economic plan or the economic strategy for Somerset and Devon over the last couple of years. So without doubt, the area has grown reasonably well, but for many years, this area has underperformed, very low productivity in some sectors, and people, we haven't got lots of large businesses, etc. And the two big things are that there has been an impact on our environment. So what's the most important thing about where we live is where we live, and we have impacted our environment. And the second thing is that not all communities have benefited from growth. So many communities have been left behind. So we did a piece of work about 18 months ago, trying to identify how you might address those long-term structural issues. And it really has led us down the path of saying we need to invest in clean growth. That's what our communities want. That's what's being expressed through the climate change emergency. And that is the opportunity for the area, rather than chasing some of these holy grails that some of our urban areas chase, etc. So we are really setting out a trajectory around embracing clean growth and certain aspects of it, which I'll come on to, but also trying to recognise that we need to make sure that all of our communities benefit from growth. Trickle down doesn't really work, so you have to try and make sure that areas are all benefiting from it. So my first slide that I wanted to come on to is what do we mean by clean growth? So it is about sustainability, and essentially it's also about inclusivity, but it's basically a direct response to climate change, and recognizing that not only do we need to grow our economy, but we need to do it by enhancing our natural environment, by reducing our impact on our carbon impact, and also making sure that all of our communities are benefiting from it. So in the past, probably UK PLC has been focused on growing, and there have been some costs to that. And what this is a much more triple helix approach, triple bottom line, around trying to place planet, people, and economy at equal levels. So that's our aim. I think we're talking the talk, if I'm being honest. I think because of COVID, we are yet to walk the walk, and that will be the challenge over the next couple of years. So what do we outline in terms of our emerging objectives around this? So that leadership is important. We need to say this is something we're proud of. We are committed to delivering the first, basically, green energy exporter across our region. So with Hinkley and with floating offshore wind and some of the opportunities delivered through things like solar and geothermal, then we have the opportunity to actually be a green energy exporter. We need to support our businesses in the transition to delivering a clean growth agenda. We may choose to fund only clean growth projects going forward. We need to basically test bed some of these things, particularly around housing, but also things like green maritime and some of our key strengths. Transport is about 30% of the carbon challenge across this area, so we need to have a sustainable transport plan that may be less reliant on fossil fuel vehicles, certainly in the medium term, but the short term that would be. And then what are we famous for? Well, our landscape, our environment, that's got a real value proposition to it. So how can we, and I don't like using the word exploit, but how can we use our landscape, our coast, our sea, in order to, as one of our unique opportunities to deliver clean growth going forward. So what we're talking about is, so we talk about the dynamic heart of clean growth. So one is energy. So we have real assets around energy that other parts of the country don't have. Probably the southwest will power the rest of the country. So if you go up to the north, their clean growth challenge is probably to decarbonize. Now we've got some of that here. So you've got, for example, if you go to the northeast, you've got quite big industrial areas that are heavy fossil fuel users, and they will look to decarbonize those. One of our key propositions is that we can supply, and you'll need about 4 times the amount of energy that we currently supply going forward, but we can supply a lot of that from the southwest if we get things like floating offshore wind, further increases in solar, and potentially geothermal energy developing over the next 20 years. The second is that we've got particular strengths in certain sectors, so aerospace, maritime, some other areas as well, digital. I'll come on to digitalization in a minute. So what does that mean in terms of clean growth? And we've got, for example, at Exeter Airport, Andy may talk about a sort of emerging future flight program there starting, and we're doing a lot of work around the coast on supporting maritime and marine sectors, whether it's a green ferry from Cornwall to Plymouth, or essentially providing autonomous green ships to service either the Navy or civils going forward. And then thirdly, we have real strengths in this area around environmental sciences, whether it's Rothamsted, whether it's UK Hydrographic Office, Met Office, etc. So we've got some real strengths around that, and agriculture as well, obviously. And what does that mean in terms of taking those clean growth agendas forward? So we're trying to make sure that in our clean growth plan, we are focusing on what we're really good at and what's distinctive from our patch. The second component of this is about embedding zero carbon. So if we are serious about net zero, then we will have to do a lot of things differently in quite a short period of time, including investing in different things. So it might include investing in hydrogen and things like that. So all this is saying is that to do that, we will basically have to change the way we work. I think that's a really interesting challenge about changing the way people act and behave, and especially when there is sort of money to be allocated, etc. So as I say, I think we're starting to talk the talk. I think we've still got some way to go when we're walking the walk, really. And then the third point is my earlier sort of discussion about understanding what our customer wants, so why people want to live here, what communities are after, and how can that help delivering low carbon recovery in a post-COVID-19 environment. And as I say, I think we're really well placed to do some of that. Okay, last couple of slides, I think. Okay, so what have we done? So first of all, we've got support for this approach from all our local authorities across the patch, and we are sort of just about to publish our Build Back Better plan. To be honest, I'm waiting for government to really sort of own it. It does feel like government's looking a bit more north and a bit more towards the Midlands at the moment, so that's quite a tough conversation at the moment. But locally, there is a lot of support that we should be moving in this direction, and this is partly because most of our, if not all of our local authorities have basically signed up to the climate change emergency, and the increasing expectation is that they will need to deliver to that going forward. It aligns pretty well with government's priorities. So there is a change. I mean, I know there's lots of changes with this government at the moment, but I think I would summarise the government agenda at the moment as being recovery, obviously post-COVID. The second would be net zero. I think particularly with COP26, then I think particularly the PM is very, very focused on trying to deliver something into COP26 that we can shout about. And then the third is levelling up. And levelling up worries me a bit because a narrative of that could mean that the North and the Midlands are funded more than the Southwest, but we're trying to change that narrative a bit. And certainly there are major issues across the Southwest of levelling up that need to get addressed, really. So we'll see, as I said, in the budget and through the year what the government's response to that. But I think where we were 2 years ago was industrial strategy, growth for growth's sake. Obviously Brexit, I'm not saying Brexit's gone away because there's still some issues around that, but I think it's important to understand where government is changing and looking, really. So we've started to try and socialise this plan across the patch. So part of today was to sort of socialise this as we go forward. And then we will come out with a sort of Build Back Better plan with our local authorities, recovery plans about trying to identify what we call the triple win. So how we can improve our economy, but also support our communities and also reduce our emissions. So finally, we're just trying to use this as a sort of summary, really. So we think there's a leadership role here. Very pleased to work with businesses who are interested in this. It is important that people feel empowered to move this agenda forward. And there's a skills issue and a capability issue there as well. The second I've talked about is low carbon energy. So we think we've got a real opportunity there. The third is how do we support businesses in this transition to be more sustainable and greener. The fourth is how do we support communities in achieving that aim as well. There's a specific piece around transport. So, for example, we will be slow adopters in this area because of the reliance of cars, in sort of dispersed areas. We haven't got electrical vehicle charging system. So how do we decarbonise our transport? And then finally, that particular opportunity about natural capital. We've gone live with a natural capital pilot when we're trying to look at carbon offsetting in the natural environment. So we think we've got some specific opportunities there, whether it's the marine park at Plymouth or our national parks or areas of outstanding natural beauty. That's clearly something that's very distinctive to our area. That's me done. Hope that's okay. Thank you.
Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. I think it's on to me. Thank you to David. I was going to try and pick up on some of the themes that he's referenced already. So my name's Andy Wood. I head up, as Richard said in opening, the Growth, Development and Prosperity Service at East Devon. I was going to start on a kind of how it started, how it's going kind of theme. And throughout, for me, there's going to be a recurring theme around adaptation to change. I just wanted to put up on a picture of a document. It's not online anyway. You have to go into County Hall to find it. But New and Expanded Communities in East Devon, in Devon, traces back, if you look at the bottom right, to August 1995. So I wanted to highlight just how long, before I get into the details, some of the lead-in period for some of these things is. And that was well before, if you like, the genesis for some of the major projects, well before things like climate change really came to the fore. So I was going to look at some of the themes, relating back to what David's just said and contextualise it in relation to a big growth corridor in East Devon, look at transport, stroke mobility, energy, employment, future of work, we'll come back there, innovation, and also green infrastructure. I see that in the questions, there's a few already questions around
natural capital, for example, as well. So I'll try and reference that as well. So just to orientate you, if you're not familiar with the geography locally, I think everyone's aware. Exeter, successful city, growing very fast. Population of 120,000 people. I'm going to look at, if you can see the green arrow, the area just extending across the M5, looking eastwards into East Devon, contrasting district, 2/3 area of outstanding natural beauty, Jurassic Coast. So the kind of marriage of coast, city and countryside, really important locally. Being near an airport, we do have a good stock of aerial pictures, thankfully. So a good strategic location. This is looking eastwards. You can see the nexus, if you like, of the M5, A30, Exeter Airport there in kind of top right. Also the Exeter Waterloo Railway line off to the left there as well. And basically the key ingredients for this is you can start to see from this image some of the new development coming forward, the Science Park in the foreground, for example. But this is a very major growth corridor. I would imagine one of the largest in the country. As I say, extending eastwards from Exeter, and it's allocated or identified to accommodate 12,000 homes, which will be a population somewhere in the region of 25,000 extra people, and around 4 million square feet of commercial space across 4 or 5 main sites. We do have an enterprise zone designation. If you're not familiar with that, that's a statutory designation that lasts for 25 years and is intended to accelerate the delivery of new commercial space. Some challenges in there, undoubtedly. Broadly speaking, around half of that commercial space is or just under half is allocated for office space, and there is a challenge there, undoubtedly, in the current market. But an enterprise zone is there to accelerate that. We are 4 years into that 25-year designation, and we have had substantial investment in enabling infrastructure already. But one of the very basic principles, if you go right way back to that document from 1995, is that in terms of growth, you try and put new homes and new jobs broadly in the same location, with the hope that people will walk to work. Essentially, it's as simple as that. And that you can see from this picture was the plan. The Devon Structure Plan was very deliberate in identifying a new town, in this case Cranbrook, but also for Plymouth, Sherford. Adjacent to those two cities. And you can see in the foreground here, little distribution centre, Sky Park, which will accommodate 6,000 jobs. But broadly speaking, 8,000 homes now at Cranbrook planned, and those two sites will deliver somewhere in the region of 8,000 jobs going forward as well. And you can cycle and walk between the two. So that was, very much, as I say, the kind of the foundation. What really glues that together is infrastructure, and the County Council have done a fantastic job from my perspective. In terms of those images, things like improvements to Junction 29, the Red Haze Bridge across the, slightly confusingly titled Red Haze Bridge, the Blue Bridge across the M5, went in very early. That's coming on for, I think, 10 years ago now. And you can see, image of the cyclist, very good infrastructure improvements designed to support people effectively not to rely on the private car. And that, for me, in that package, circa 50 million on that screen alone of investment, part of the wider investment the County Council have made in things like the Estuary Trail, really benefiting, coming to the fore, I would suggest, in the current climate now. Some things we didn't think about, undoubtedly, whilst it's not that old in terms of the actual outline planning permission. I think it's probably 5 years ago. Probably weren't talking about final mile distribution, and certainly we weren't talking about a timeline towards kind of the ending of sales of internal combustion engine vehicles. So this is a 95,000 square foot Amazon facility that's been open for just coming on for kind of 18 months or so. They have taken their van fleet back in-house, 420 space facility. Ordinarily, we would resist that type of thing. We don't really want to see lots of parking when we might be losing, if you like, employment generating buildings. But the win here was that the first 100 spaces were enabled with EV charging points, and that will staircase up to the full 420 as we go forward. So already I live in Exeter and I have Amazon electric vans, coming from this depot delivering to me, which is a great benefit from my perspective, and a part of what we should be doing more of going forward in terms of this site.
The other thing as well that was quite far-sighted from my perspective was this. I don't know whether people are familiar with district heating, but when you're talking about large developments like Cranbrook that are going to take 10, 20 more years to build out, you can afford to take the long view. And in that case, or in this case, that was against when this was going through the original kind of planning in 2008. There was the Code for Sustainable Homes, which was ramping up to net zero, I think it was, code level 6 by 2016. Some very seminal work done to say, well, if you went down a fabric measures, house by house, it's going to cost you X. And if you went around district heating, it's going to cost you X minus, I think it was something like 60%. So it's significantly cheaper to look at district heating and a decentralized energy network. So it serves every house in Cranbrook. And also Sky Park, clearly important to also think about commercial development, part of an investment by E.ON. 2 networks now in the locality, including straddling the M5, that will ultimately serve 12,000 homes. The original intention was for this to be biomass combined heat and power. With the benefit of the intervening 10 years, we're now looking at utilising waste heat from a forthcoming energy from waste plant. There's an investment decision in London that I'm waiting on today to make that project happen. But we think we're very confident we can hit 80% carbon reductions for those 8,000 homes that already connect to that network. And we have a policy requirement for the further 4,000 homes in the expansions areas of Cranbrook to hit net zero. And for me, that is a great target to have. It's challenging. It requires infrastructure like this. But we, as I say, confident we can get there. The other thing, for me, I described this as serendipity, but quite rightly, Tony Norton at the university, who played a very significant role in making this happen, corrected me and said it's more like making your own luck. So probably you're not familiar with this project. You have to ask Edward if I always get it wrong between AC and DC, but this is a large interconnector running from the Cherbourg Peninsula through to Budleigh Silverstone effectively, and connecting up to the main national grid substation at Broadclist. But what it does, and the main connector station just to the south of Exeter Airport runway, will generate lots of waste heat, 8 megawatts thermal, and we can utilise that and run it into the district heating network going forward. And that's part of the kind of, if you like, the agility in quite slow terms, but the agility that's needed to take account of new energy sources as we move forward and get to net zero. The other thing for me, and this I think really speaks to David's point about the future of work, is in very short order we've seen huge changes, perhaps that were already happening, but have been condensed and accelerated. So the article on the left really caught my eye. Amazon now effectively becoming the world's largest employer, and that's a benefit for us because they're recruiting locally. It's also arguably a challenge to the high streets. But also on the right, we've seen investment here at the science part. This is the Environmental Futures and Big Data Impact Lab. We never anticipated, it certainly was never on the radar 10, 20 years ago, that there would be the Met Office's supercomputer landing at the science park. And the fact we can now look, and it's probably a common theme between the two, around data science, and the work that, for example, the college is doing around the Institute of Technology, Exeter College, to look at training local people to be able to access those opportunities coming forward, for me is very significant and points to how we're shifting, hopefully towards addressing, what is a very long-standing challenge around effectively a low-wage economy locally as well, and how we can generate those higher value jobs going forward. Not just hopefully, in terms of how we pivot and move forward in that respect. And for me, it's probably exemplified in this. This is the same sliding doors, if that makes sense, in both pictures. One taken pretty much exactly 10 years ago now, with the opening of the Flybe Training Academy, with Jim French and the then Chancellor. Sadly, I think everyone knows, March the 5th, Flybe went into administration. The airport has really suffered. We've seen it's been the epicenter for over 1,000 job losses over the last year or so. And also, it's seen a 97% drop in passenger traffic as well. On the flip side, and this is the optimistic view, obviously, but great for me to see, the county council, acquiring that building, leasing it to Exeter College, who are now, repurposing it and relaunching it as the Future Skills Centre. That will look at, making sure the local population, bear in mind, for example, there's going to be 25% minimum affordable housing in Cranbrook, for example. The local population can have the right skills to really access those new employment opportunities coming forward. So they'll be targeting agri-tech, clean energy, telecoms, as well as aviation going forward as well. So for me, that's a really encouraging sign of how we can adapt in perhaps the worst of circumstances. So Flybe was the largest private sector employer in East Devon. And equally, David mentioned this, a huge challenge for aviation currently. And as I said, the airport has lost over 1,000 jobs in total. What we have seen, and you can see there the logo, Exeter Aerospace coming in and taking on the hangars. Clearly, high paid, highly skilled engineering jobs are the ones that we can least afford to lose locally. So great that Dublin Aerospace have set up Exeter Aerospace and are now investing there. What also David hinted at was recent success with what's known as the government's Future Flight Programme. Ampere, a Californian company, investing, partnering with local airlines and with Newquay to start running or testing electrical flight, essentially electrified flight. And for me, that kind of hints at a future for Exeter Airport as potentially being, well, a lot more sustainable in terms of how you hit the key challenge, if you like, of decarbonising the aviation industry, what's known as the third era of aviation, so propeller jet, electric or hydrogen going forward. And the prospects of the airport playing a significant role in that, for me, is really enticing. And this concept of a sustainable aviation cluster, it certainly won't deliver 1 million passengers a year, which was where the airport was at last year, but hopefully it will be part of the, if you like, the vanguard for moving forward in that respect. And the other thing that gives me confidence is around the kind of innovation piece, the role of the university, the science part. So I've kind of gone out east and have kind of come back again to the M5, if that makes sense. The university play a key role, the expertise that's there. This building opened just over a year ago. It's part of the engineering faculty, the Centre for Clean Mobility at the university. You may have seen in the picture of the Flybe Training Academy, Mark Hodgson from Co-Bikes just announcing, rolling out the kind of bike sharing to the Future Skills Centre. But the whole mission, if you like, that was never part of the plan, in terms of, we were talking very traditionally about transport, even over only 10 years ago. That shift to mobility, and you see here the development of new hybrid and electric powertrain technology, angling through that building, which is bringing together university expertise and leveraging it into local companies like Supercat, who make off-road vehicles for the defence industry. For me, again, that speaks to a brighter prospects, clean growth in terms of how that can happen locally as well. So I find that very encouraging in terms of the expertise that's available locally. And the last one, and this is a project that has been in the planning for 15 years. This is around natural capital. And I do see a bright future for Devon. I think, in terms of places to have experienced, various local and national restrictions and lockdowns, Devon, for me, has been come into its own in terms of the ability to enjoy a fantastic environment still. And we're trying to make sure here, these are the Clyst Valley Regional Park, a new green space, which is 50% the size of Exeter. But you can see the relationship with that major growth corridor, making sure we're actually achieving biodiversity net gain, increasing tree planting, all in very close proximity to Cranbrook and Exeter itself, but also extending the Exeter Trail. It currently goes, people who are familiar with the locality, to Topsham and Darts Farm. The ability to link that northwards, extend the multi-use trail, the cycling trail, up to Killerton, for example. For me, that really would be a fantastic thing to have, and not just from a leisure perspective, but the ability to get to work as well. So that whole lifestyle piece for me is really key part of clean growth. And whilst it's been, and I admire the resilience of my colleagues here in continuing to move this forward, but a long time in the planning, we're now starting to see some of this critical green infrastructure delivered in step with, if you like, bricks and mortar development as well. So that's it from me. Thank you very much for listening. I'm going to hand over to Edward, and I just leave you a lovely picture of some trees at Baltimore Park. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Andrew, and thank you for leaving me with a nice image that I then have to cut away from straight away on that one. But firstly, thank you very much to Foot Anstey and for David and Andrews earlier. I think it really interesting team pulled together here and really exciting. I'm going to go through Pivot Power and effectively what our model is, and then really where there are opportunities for clean growth, Pivot are an enabler for that, and what we're looking to do, and how we can do it in the Southwest, and hopefully help accelerate these projects that are going in the right direction. As you'll see from the slide, Pivot actually is Edf Renewables company. We got procured in late 2019 by Edf Renewables. Edf Renewables are effectively a UK sister company of the EDF Energy. So the renewables arm isn't the supply arm, but it is the arm that is building the large amount of renewable generation across the country on that. I'm going to rush through quite a few slides on this, very aware of time and seeing some great questions coming in. So want to get through to that, but in essence, want to run through a bit more about the why, the how, and especially the when and the where of what Pivot are doing. We try to explain this as simply as we can, but as said at the beginning, I've got a few problems. I'm an engineer by background, which means I like technical detail, which means it's very difficult for me to explain in simple terms what it is we do. Compounded with that, I'm talking about the electricity industry, which there are more acronyms than words as far as I can make out. So layer on that the complexities of the setup in the UK here, and it's an interesting system to deal with. So going to try and make my way through more of the detail, how we're up to, where we're up to, what it is we do, and how that can help opportunities for clean growth in the Southwest. To start with, really though, it is all about the why. Why are we doing this? What is this? And Pivot and Edf Renewables have come together, and it is a mission-driven element. What are we looking to do? And that is, it's very simple, as it says on the screen there. And something I picked up again in Andrew's presentation there, what I really like about the opportunities to have in the Southwest is there's so much going for it. The district heating system that takes waste heat from the AC/DC converter there is just one of those examples. It takes foresight, it takes planning, and a little bit of understanding and belief that actually what has been done before can be done better. And I'm really big into that, looking at how that word accelerate can be nurtured, because we're not held back as we thought we were or as we could be by technology anymore. The technology is there. It's about enabling it. It's about looking forward and seeing what can be done and embracing change and this transition across. So anything that anyone's seen from David Attenborough of late says that we aren't on the clock. We are pretty much beaten by the clock, and we need to hurry up on what we're doing. So we are very much a mission-driven element and keen to enable these things as we can. In essence, what Pivot are famous for is big battery storage. It's what we came out of the gates with in 2018, trying to build a portfolio across the UK of 50 megawatt sites. This picture here is actually the site in Oxford, where we've working actually with Innovate UK to try different things. The image there you'll see is a 52 megawatt system, in fact, because there is 50 megawatts of lithium ion, and they're the containers in the background, the far side of that, and 2 megawatts of vanadium flow. So 50 megawatts, 50 megawatt hours in the background, 2 megawatts, 5 megawatt hours in the near ground. And you can, again, just see the space differences on that, but both key to enabling things going forward. But again, very exciting in terms of its duration and how it can be used and how long it lasts. But again, it takes up a lot more space and has different commercial challenges. I think this is a bit of an obvious one, is why it's important and where storage sits. So I'm going to run over that quite quickly. But the instant, as soon as you realize that Pivot are into storage, Edf Renewables are into renewable generation, it's a very nice tie-in there between the two companies, and you can see the synergies and why it works and why Edf Renewables came out and procured Pivot. One of the key elements is Pivot are doing this differently, and we'll look to touch on that in a bit further detail more. But we're attaching all our equipment to the transmission network, so not the distribution network. I'm going to focus a little bit on why that's different and where that sits, to hopefully give people a bit more of a picture about the two systems in the UK, and try and bust some myths as well as show what can be enabled. First of all, apologies if I'm teaching anyone to stuff they already know, but to break it down so we can build it back up, the transmission network is effectively the very large pylons, the 400,000 volt or 275,000 volt cables that run across the UK, or certainly England and Wales, as shown by the image here. And that is the network, in essence. It's managed by National Grid as the ESO, whereas the transmission operator looks after the wires and cables on that. It's a bit of detail, but I'll come on to why in a second. So for Pivot, connecting directly into the transmission system is what we do. And again, the reasons for it are we want to be able to build this portfolio of energy storage that enables more renewable generation to be able to provide flexibility to the UK system. So we're not looking at, ideally, we're not looking at curtailing excess solar when it's there. And that is one of the issues that the Southwest has at the moment in terms of a distribution level that hopefully can be enabled by more storage and more flexibility, both in usage and other things. So with Pivot's focus on that, we're looking at absorbing, of course, energy when it's plentiful and putting it back into when the system needs it. It's a relatively simple model. It's a merchant model, but again, built at scale. Coming on to more about the hows and how this enables it, we see the storage as a national play. It's absorbing energy from renewables and putting them back into the system at a grid level, at a national grid level. So that's our, although built locally, a national ambition to pull decarbonisation and provide that flexibility across the system. We also, with all these transmission connections, have a local ambition, and that focus at the moment is on decarbonising transport or connecting other users, high demand users, to the system and providing that capacity. Capacity has been a barrier for many, especially at a local level when the system to date has always been built on a power station down to user model. So as people need more capacity going up and increasing, it's getting harder and harder to find. It's also going to cost more and more to put in. Explaining a little bit more about capacity and what that is and how that can be defined is, I tend to use the water analogy, where capacity is the size of the tap that can let the energy flow. If you've got a small tap, you can't get a lot of water out of it. That is your limitation, the bottleneck in the system, if you will. So Pivot's looking to bring large amounts of capacity and with capacity to grow. So we're not supplying the electricity itself. We are providing the infrastructure that can be delivered through. And what impact that has, again, coming back down to linking back to Andrew's presentation, those 420 car parking spaces, if all of those cars wanted a higher amount of charge at 10 kilowatts each, you're starting to really ramp up in terms of the demand. The equivalent of that, so just 400 kVA is the equivalent of a large supermarket in terms of demand, if you look at that. So ramping up as we go in cars, and then further down the line into larger vehicles, last mile delivery vehicles, sizing up that to sort of 16 tons, and then finally into HGVs and things like that. If they go to electric or battery electric, it's going to need huge amounts of power to be able to deliver it very quickly. Was talking to someone just this week about the new Charin, which is a standardization for EV charging plugs, and they're looking at the ability to charge vehicles at 3 megawatts. And that's, if you're talking in very simple terms, that's sort of 3,000 homes worth, as rough numbers go. And it is very rough numbers, so don't quote me on any of those. One of my favorite Daily Mail facts, if I was going to bash the Daily Mail, is that, there's all these capacity problems with National Grid. The capacity problems aren't with National Grid. National Grid has plenty of headroom on the larger overhead lines. And that's why, again, Pivot have looked to connect into that to be able to jump onto that capacity. And this is where the system separates. The transmission system delivers energy across the country, and then it's picked up by your local distribution networks, who then deliver it downstream from that to homes and businesses. And they've been doing phenomenally at that, and we've been very lucky with a very robust system to date. What's happening with our change across to electrification is something that's happening very fast in the scheme of things. And also with the uptake of renewables, it's happening in a very short space of time, and infrastructure takes a long time to build. So we are seeing a lot of pinch points on the distribution network, and that's something that Pivot are hoping to be able to, for those people that need it, provide capacity that they can grow into. And this is really where the model comes together. This is where Pivot sit in it. We are not a direct competitor with any of the DNOs. If anything, we're looking to be able to provide a leapfrog from that system to be able to provide multiple megawatts of capacity to those that need it. If you look at the line in the bottom right corner, we're not looking to take over any existing supplies. What we're looking to do is enable those who are investing in growth. So a good example is bus depots, where you've got buses that are all currently provided by the diesel tank in the yard at the moment. They're looking to clean up and provide clean transport. So they're looking to electrify. The technology is there. It is expensive, but it's coming down in price. But the issue there is, how do they get capacity? 100 buses on charge overnight is between 4 to 6 megawatts sudden requirement. That's an enormous uplift from the probably couple of hundred kVA or 0.2 megawatts that they're on at the moment. And that's where the expense kicks in, trying to run that in. A new cable in is what Pivot are looking to offer, to be able for those guys to have future ability to grow and certainty when they do it. So coming back to what the network is, it is multi-megawatt. We're looking at very large capacity for people that are going to grow into it. I used the analogy beginning of the year that's saying this is more of a fiber optic offering in place of a dial-up. And I hadn't really checked my audience, because the first question was, what is dial-up? I don't know that reference, and suddenly showing my age on that one. I didn't get to play the noise of dial-up in comparison to that. So it's something I might have to build into future presentations on that one. But with that, what we are talking about is the unlimited equivalent of capacity that people can grow into. So as I said, the buses analogy is a very good one, looking at how they can grow into that. And because this is a dedicated network, Pivot looking for people that need future capacity. So the focus on EVs is, it's great having fast chargers now and putting 10 in the ground immediately, like we're doing at Oxford, or actually 20 at Oxford. But that's good for the next couple of years. Are the chargers going to get faster? Hopefully. Are they going to be needing more of them? Highly likely. So building a network that has the headroom for people to grow into it. With that network building, again, comes future price certainty, so that people know what they're buying into as they do it. And again, a key element to being able to grow with this is that economic certainty around that. Coming on to where we're doing it, which is the key element. And again, you'll see a good smattering of sites down in the southwest here that we're looking to do. We've got 2 sites, Oxford, which is our super hub site, and there is a link there, and do search for it if you're looking at it, which has been a phenomenal project, and one that we're hoping to see being able to charge later this year. And a site in Kent as well, where the battery is doing actually very close to fully operational on that side of things. And then we're excited about the Coventry and North Birmingham sites, which are going to be coming online next year, and going through the plannings on that at the moment. We've then got the following sites, the blue dots on that, expanding out from that. This map shouldn't be taken as read. Things are constantly moving and constantly opportunities there. And the great thing about this, as things move in different areas, we bring forward sites and look at them accordingly. We're also looking at how we can do that and how we can bring more online at a quicker rate of what we're doing. So to come back to it, and appreciate I've chewed up a lot of time here, it's a very clear mission to what we're doing. It's a very clear offering in terms of size and scalability, which is the key element. We can do that very simply by tapping into a place where there's already capacity, missing out the area that's constrained at the moment, so we can enable what needs to be done as soon as possible, and hopefully giving people the ability to put in projects that they want to. I could spend a while on the business model and why it's unique. The key element to take away is, I suppose, that the battery is a national element. It's looking at integrating more renewables into the system being across the UK. So we can store renewables generated in the southwest and, as David said, feed the northeast, for example. Whereas the private wire network, that provision of capacity to users, is very much a local, almost a hyper-local element close to the substation. We're not going to be running cables for across counties. It's going to be providing super hubs and charging facilities and businesses with the capacity that they can grow into within the local area. And that was one of the key elements to the sites we've chosen and where we've got connections on that. Finally, I'm going to wrap up effectively on just what are the limitations of it. And in essence, it's just about size and scale. What can we do? It's also not solely on demand. It's also about generation. Coming back down to how do we look at things? What can be done? Last mile combined with park and ride or park and change, combined with overnight storage or of council fleets and things like that. Slight rethink on how land is used, and if you've got land and power or space and power, what can be done with it? And coming back to the district heating example, looking at maximizing this. But within all these scenarios, Pivot's just an enabler. We're there providing the capacity for these sorts of things and these sorts of projects to be taken forward. Thank you very much for your time on that. I will just leave very on the end slide. There is the link there to the Energy Super Hub Oxford. Do go and have a look at it. The website's got lots of details on it. But I will stop there. So we've got all of about 90 seconds for questions. Apologies, Matt.
Thank you very much, Ed. And yes, we're running a little bit late, but if everyone can bear with us for maybe 10 minutes, we've had a few questions come in, but we'll carry on to about sort of 1:10 to try and get through some of those questions. Thank you to all our speakers today. Just whilst we give a bit of a pause and allow time for some more questions to come in, just a reminder, please do use the Q&A function to submit some questions. I am going to start, though, we'll just give a moment for people to put their questions in. If we just allow a colleague to join, Chris Pritchett hopefully will be joining as I speak. His camera will be going live. There he is on cue. Chris is a partner and head of our energy team and is joining us today. Chris, do you have a question for any of the panel?
Yeah, hi everybody. I really enjoyed that. Thanks very much. My role is sort of head of energy and future mobility, and so obviously everything talked about today is of great interest. And we've been on the pivot journey since Ed's CEO tried to describe to me the business model over about far too many beers about 3 years ago. So that really is wonderful. But for that reason, I'm sort of, Ed, forgive me, I'm not going to relay a question to you. But there's a really interesting one that's popped up from Ali Mountford at Devon County Council, just sort of addressing this point about grid constraint at DNO level. And is there anything that the LEP could do to that? I mean, could it look at forward funding some of the infrastructure improvements and reclaim that back from potential connection projects? I mean, Ed, I know you would have a solution to that, but I'm sort of interested in whether there is a role for the LEP there, and is that something that could be considered, or is it, what could the LEP do to step in there, if anything?
Yeah, so it's not something we've done in the past, and this is where I'm talking about possibly using our funding in a different way. So we are actually taking a paper to the LEP board in April to discuss this very issue, really, and I am interested in loans rather than grants. So the payback mechanism is interesting because everybody loves a grant, but actually loans are probably better things to do because it encourages more commercially based propositions. So I think if we're taking clean growth seriously, then we will need, probably through the LEP or something similar, to have a mechanism by which we are able to upfront costs, particularly around distribution, and there is a payback mechanism for when those sites are developed. So I think that is probably one of the key tools that we will need to demonstrate that we are actually taking this seriously. So it's a very live discussion, and I'm optimistic that we will be able to play a role in doing that going forward. Yes.
I'm really encouraged to hear that. I think that would be great, because again, just so that the upgrade cost doesn't fall onto the first applicant in the chain, and it socialises it potentially across a load of exciting projects. And Ed, not a great surprise, but you might have a view on that.
And probably not a view that I should probably turn the recording off for this one, because it's not necessarily a very strong pivot view. But for those projects that have been dragging because of the connection issue, the ENA are looking for projects, shovel-ready projects, to be able to fund connections on. So I would recommend going forward for that. Flip side of that, Pivot are looking to come into the southwest, and if I have my way, hopefully with 2 sites coming very soon. We were working on a number of actual renewable generation in the area that link to that. And again, with that, the private wire and the capacity on that has space on it. So can't talk a huge amount about what the plans are, because things are still it's sitting in the Foot Anstey desk for tidying up my terrible drafting writing. But very excited about what we're trying to do going forward.
And one of the things we will probably do at the LEP is we will look to partner. So I don't think we will look to do it in isolation. So I'm really interested in partnering up, another fund, maybe a private sector fund. So we might put in 20 million, and they might match it or something. They'd have slightly different commercial propositions, and it may well be that we partner somebody like Pivot Power or someone like that who could help make it happen, if you like. So that's certainly a discussion worth pursuing. Yes.
I think it sounds hugely exciting. Ed, Venmore.
Thank you. Yeah, no, thank you. One of the questions we've had in, interesting one. Southwest has a major opportunity to be a location for a gigascale battery factory. Key requirement is proximity to low carbon electricity, hence Blythe, the Northeast is the first location to go forward. What are you all doing to make the Southwest the next location? Perhaps Andy, have you got any thoughts on that one?
Yeah, I might answer briefly and then hand over to David. But I think it was posed by Keith, I think lives in the West Midlands and will be aware of the gigafactory proposals at Coventry Airport, which came onto my radar because Coventry Airport is also a Rigby group as part of their portfolio. And that was effectively developing the gigafactory on the runway. And obviously, I really hope we don't go down that route personally. But I think there is a genuine opportunity at Gravity, for example, which is further up the M5, which is, again, part of the enterprise zone designation. And at that point, as it's out of my patch, I'll hand over to David, who might want to pick that up.
Yes, I was just writing that up in the notes, actually. So we, or the owners of Gravity, which is Salamanca Group, are actively marketing, along with Department of International Trade, that site. It's a 600-acre site. It used to be an ordnance factory. We funded a new road access into it, which is probably going to open in the next month or so. So it's absolutely that sweet spot at the moment of opening up. And it is one of probably... We think there's a need for DIT think there's a need for 8 gigafactories in the UK at the moment. And it's certainly probably in the top 3 sites that are ready to go to service that need. So hopefully in the next, in the foreseeable future, we will get somebody very interested in that. There was rumours in the papers about 6 months ago that Elon Musk had made a visit, but I'm not entirely sure that was true, actually.
Okay. If there's no more comments on that one, we'll go to another question, and this is very much focused on the summer holiday plans. Obviously, the Southwest being a major tourist destination, what are we doing to enable visitors with electric vehicles to have a great experience, both at destinations, hotels, and on the main road network this summer? Which is a bit short notice, I suspect, but any thoughts on that?
I obviously got thoughts. I can't help this summer, but coming up over the next ones, yes, very keen, and hopefully the corridor all the way down from Bristol through down to Cornwall should, along with what government are planning on the Project Rapid element, but also further afield, so further down, have serious capacity available for that transport element. And again, that's Pivot have looked at the substations along those routes. And have identified it as serious potential. So we have dots on the map accordingly for that, and are working closely. There's some exciting stuff bubbling away. So yeah, watch this space. Sadly, the caveat is it is infrastructure, so this summer's definitely no-go. But hopefully in the next or the following summers, we're going to be seeing some progress.
Can I just add to that as
well?
Yeah,
sure, Andy.
Great, thank you. Well, a bit like the differentiation between the kind of national grid and local distribution. So at the local side, we have a portfolio of car parks across the district. We are starting to move forward with projects to roll out charging points to those car parks in some of our coastal resorts, for example. But on the flip side as well, I didn't show the picture, but the Science Park recently completed, or at least in kind of tarmac terms, is a 300 space park and change facility. For me, that's given it's at the junction of the A30 and M5, that is a fantastic opportunity to roll out every space with very high charging for all those people who are coming down from London, want to break, recharge and carry on down to Cornwall, for example. So for me, that combination of local and strategic plays in a number of different ways.
Okay, thank you very much. Perhaps one final question for David. Could the LEP lead the way by incorporating natural capital in economic assessments?
I hope so. So we are absolutely trying to do that. So we've just launched a natural capital pilot program where we are offering loans of up to £1 million in order to try and progress a natural capital solution. So probably something to do with carbon offsetting or something like that. So what we're really trying to do is create a value proposition. So we are quite concerned actually that people are very used to grants, and you don't create value through grants. You create an outcome, absolutely. But so we are thinking more about loans, and hopefully we'll get 3 or 4 schemes away under that. And then we've also committed to, in reviewing any future investments, that we will require investment business cases to include a natural capital methodology about the impacts, etc., and what they might do to resolve it, and that will also probably include environmental quality, etc., etc. And we will also ask people to do something similar about inclusive growth and social capital. Now, for the last round, and this is a bit of a cop-out to be fair, we had to basically put together our final list in about 3 weeks. So we've made that, we haven't made that conditional. We've made it as we are working with all the projects now on what those might look like. But we are quite keen that if there are future bidding rounds or funding rounds, that we will make those criteria for investment. So I don't know anywhere else that's doing that at the moment. So our plan is to do that. But I haven't, as yet, I'm waiting for government to confirm how it's going to fund local growth, to understand whether or not we'll actually have some money to start making investments going forward, really. But I hope it will include a natural capital set of conditions, yes.
Great, thank you very much, David, and thank you to everyone for joining us today, and obviously for our speakers. What I'm sure everyone will agree was a really helpful, insightful session in looking at the clean growth opportunities. We'll circulate follow-up communications with key points from today, contacts, and recording the session. So if we've not managed to answer any of your questions today, we'll look to cover off those when we go around to everyone. Anyway, thank you very much, everyone, for joining today, and we'll draw it to a close. Hope you have a good rest of the day. Thank you.